Well, thank you so much for the opportunity to speak tonight. I will speak in support of 7789 and 497. My name is Polly Crozier. I'm an attorney with GLBTQ Legal Advocates and Defenders. We work throughout New England to promote equality for LGBTQ people and people living with HIV. I also, by training, happen to be a family lawyer and an adoption lawyer as well.
I apologize. I wasn't trying to land a plane. I'm trying to get him to shut the door.
I'll first address the Parentage Bill. This is a critical but common sense bill that modernizes Rhode Island parentage law and secure the legal parent relationships of all children in Rhode Island, regardless of the circumstances of their birth. This bill really has broad-based support from the Department of Vital Records to the Office of Child Support Services, who you'll hear from soon, to lawyers, to most importantly to families who really remain vulnerable. The Rhode Island Parentage Act would fill these gaping holes in Rhode Island law. Rhode Island has no statutes protecting children born through assisted reproduction. We're the only state in New England with that gap. Rhode Island has no statutes protecting children born through surrogacy. 19 states plus DC have the surrogacy statutes, and 25 states allow surrogacy by case law. Rhode Island is the only state in New England that has no protective statutes or protective case law for these children and these families. We also, in Rhode Island, have no equal way for unmarried LGBTQ people to establish themselves as parents right at birth. So as it stands, Rhode Island parentage law is unfortunately unconstitutional. This comprehensive bill would really address all those issues. It's based on the Uniform Parentage Act of 2017, which is really a model act recommended to the states by a national, nonpartisan Uniform Law Commission. There was extensive study and consideration by family law experts across the country to craft that model legislation. And I will note that the primary drafter submitted testimony today and happens to be a renowned law professor, Courtney Jocelyn, who is also a Rhode Island native, grew up here in Warwick, clerked for the Rhode Island Supreme Court, and is her sister still lives in the state and has submitted comprehensive testimony in support of this law that she provided the framework for. This bill has been approved by the American Bar Association, which also in January of 2019 issued a call to states to protect LGBTQ parents and their right to parent, because these families are vulnerable to attack from every corner at this point in time, and we have to act to protect them. I will also note that Rhode Island has many times adopted uniform laws from the ULC. In 2015, Rhode Island adopted the Uniform Adult Guardianship Act, the Uniform Domestic Violence Prevention Protection Order Act in 2006, the Uniform Family Support Act, Uniform Child Custody Jurisdiction Act. This is just one of those uniform acts that really makes a lot of sense. The current Rhode Island law on paternity, in fact, was modeled on this model legislation, but it's 40 years old and hasn't been updated. So this merely moves us up to the 21st century and adopts the cutting-edge, most appropriate modern statute. I see that Judge Fort of the Family Court has submitted a letter in opposition. I just want to briefly address that.
I just want to say, I've had discussions with several family court judges about this, one who's actually grew up in my house, so she calls and screams at me from time to time about what she thinks I'm doing wrong. But the family court judges do have one particular issue, and that is the way our adoption statute is written now, most of the family court judges will not for a different sex couple, they need to be married in order to adopt a child. And there's a concern about an equal protection issue if we allow a same-sex couple to adopt a child if they are not married. So that is the fundamental issue that the family court has.
Well, and I appreciate that. And when I get to the adoption piece, I actually would love to address those concerns, and I'm happy to. I think there's room to make amendments.
I apologize. I realize he submitted letters in opposition to both. I thought it was just the adoption piece.
So did I, and I was actually surprised that he did that. And I just want to address, particularly because I think there's some misinformation in that parentage opposition. First, the bill does allow a 60-day rescission period for VAPs because that's what federal law now requires. And so this bill brings Rhode Island into compliance with federal law. It does not define the rights of divorcing parents regarding embryos and gametes. It doesn't even address that. It does provide for surrogacy, but that's incredibly important because it's happening in Rhode Island. 44 states provide it, and these laws would provide clear protections for all people involved in that process. And also, I think it's important to note that other state agencies are in support of this bill. So just to address the issues. And I would also be happy to sit and talk with anyone about those particular issues. So,
and I know, again, to interrupt, two things that I want to say, but I know that Mike Grant is here, and we've heard from him in the past on this issue, so I know he'll talk about concerns that he's actually seeing on a day-to-day basis with these issues. But another is, I know in years past, legislation has been submitted kind of piecemeal with respect to the Uniform Parentage Act. And it's my understanding, and I just want to have you touch on the fact that that's a real issue. And I know both GLAAD and the ACLU, I've had discussions with in the past, and have said very clearly, we're better off with nothing unless it's the entire Uniform Parentage Act in terms of changing the legislation. Is that fair?
I agree with that. I think it's a package deal, very well crafted together, and it really all fits together. And I think it's very straightforward. In the few short years it was promulgated, a number of states have adopted it. I think it is where all the states are going, and Rhode Island would be really wise to adopt it as a one piece of legislation that's really straightforward and easy to use. So I won't talk more other than to say that I think the right to parent is one of the most important constitutional rights that exist in the United States, and this bill will protect that right for all families, and I thank the committee for supporting it. And in terms of adoption, I'll be brief to say, I again think this is a common sense protection to remove barriers to adoption for LGBTQ parents who use assisted reproduction to create their families. At this point, married families, in addition to unmarried families, have to go home studies, notice to donors, and 6-month waiting periods. And these add considerable cost, delay, and really stress to families who are worried about experiencing difficulty in the court system. So I do not think that this is in any way a rubber stamp on adoption. It still gives the courts discretion to order home studies and order notice and order waiting periods in cases they think are appropriate. But this is really a relatively narrow bill that just addresses people who have very thoughtfully planned their children through assisted reproduction. And I would ask for support for this bill, and also welcome discussing with anyone amendments to resolve the issues of the family court.
Thank you very much. Any questions or comments for this witness? Could I just ask if you could prepare me something in writing responding to the family court's concerns, because I know I'm going to get a phone call and it'll be much easier for me to deal with it that way.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.